Mayor Bramson, first of all, congratulations on your selection as the Democratic nominee last night for County Executive.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was gratifying to receive support from so many Democrats, but I know that the main event is still ahead and lots of work in front of us.
There are a few surprised people in Westchester County. We had heard as late as a month ago that Ken Jenkins might be the leading nominee or the leading candidate. I'm sure you're not surprised by your win last night, but do you feel as though it was a little bit of a come from behind for you?
Well, if you go back a few months, it's probably true that I was less well known than the other competitors in the race, but we got a really warm and positive feedback from almost all of the communities that we visited, and as we head into the convention, we knew it was close, and we were optimistic that we would prevail. I have to say that both Ken Jenkins and Bill Ryan were enormously gracious, and there certainly was a spirit of unity and common purpose, which really bound us together as the convention got underway and as the convention ended.
And you now have the advantage of not having to go through a primary, so that's going to make your path towards November that much easier. I want to get into the biggest issue in the county right now, and that is the housing discrimination lawsuit and the county's response to it. It's been 4+ years now since that deal was announced. I assume you agree with a lot of Westchester residents that the unresolved issues here make the county look bad, correct?
Absolutely. Look, whether we agree with the settlement or disagree with the settlement, I think all of us recognize that we've got to get this behind us. And the strategy that County Executive Astorino has undertaken in recent years has been self-evidently a disaster. We're losing court case after court case. Just a couple of days ago, we learned that the U.S. Attorney may be holding the county executive in contempt. We have the federal government holding up millions of dollars in funds that are urgently needed by localities and by not-for-profits. So this kind of a pattern of defiance and obstruction may play well in certain quarters when it comes to a political context, but it is deeply damaging to our community, deeply damaging to organizations that need these funds, our money, and deeply damaging to the reputation of the county. We need to have a constructive approach to resolving this.
County Executive Astorino, when he was still candidate Astorino in the RFL RNN debate, which was held in this building, pledged to abide by the settlement and the decision through HUD and through the courts. The courts continually reinforcing that he hasn't. Can you pledge that under your leadership, if elected county executive, that the county will abide by those decisions and also not have to spend any more money on legal fees trying to counter?
I believe in the rule of law, and we all have an obligation, especially those of us in public office, to observe the law and honor the decisions of the courts. So that's not really a difficult question to answer. We've got to do it. And what concerns me, and I listened to the county executive's State of the County address a couple of days ago, is he is now entirely mischaracterizing the nature of the responsibilities that the county has to discharge. He talked about 11,000 units of housing, spending $1 billion, a 200% tax increase, getting rid of all zoning codes, dropping a high-rise onto every block. All of that is completely made up. It bears no resemblance whatsoever to the actual terms of the settlement or the actual terms that the federal government is requiring of the county. And I think this is a process of engaging in scare tactics and deception so that people will not understand that, in fact, our responsibilities are far less onerous, far less difficult to resolve than that. So I don't think we need the county executive to promise to protect us from an imaginary make-believe threat. What we need is constructive leadership that will deal with the actual problem as it exists in the real world.
Do you think he's trying to scare voters in Westchester County, or do you think he's trying to scare HUD and the federal government into somehow changing their approach?
I don't think that that the kind of technique that he demonstrated in his State of the County address is going to be intimidating to the federal government or to HUD. I can't read minds. I don't know what his motivation may have been, but I do know that the information he presented is completely untrue. And again, whether we agree or disagree, we all should be working from a common set of facts. We're entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. And on an issue of this kind of paramount importance, I think getting the facts straight is critical.
Mr. Astorino has repeatedly referred to this settlement and the specifics within it as social engineering. Do you agree?
I don't think that kind of language is constructive. Look, let me tell you where I'm coming from generally. I think that diversity and affordability strengthen communities. In New Rochelle, I have a record of constructing affordable housing in a way that's non-controversial and that has been accepted in the neighborhoods where housing has been built. And we should recognize that affordable housing is housing for cops and firefighters and civil servants and teachers. And if it is well planned, can really strengthen the economy and the fabric of the communities in which it's located. Now, that does not mean that we should simply build anywhere under any circumstances. You have to have respect for the character of a community, and nobody is talking about abrogating zoning codes or eliminating home rule. It's about a balance point. And I think to mischaracterize, again, as the county executive has done, the nature of our responsibilities really is not a constructive way to move forward, and it is putting us at risk. Millions of dollars that are being lost, dollars that are urgently needed in our communities, and that to me is a gross dereliction of responsibility.
Can a county executive compel municipalities within the county to change their laws when it comes to, for example, source of income or other issues that are specified under this agreement? That's been one of County Executive Astorino's big complaints, that he can't force municipalities to take action.
Well, let's distinguish zoning from source of income. Source of income is legislation that can, and I expect will be adopted at the county level. When it comes to zoning, no, the county cannot force a change in zoning codes, but the county can certainly encourage a comprehensive look at zoning and work with municipalities in a constructive way to meet the tests that have been outlined by the federal government. And to be clear, those tests require an analysis, comprehensive and careful analysis of zoning, and they require all of us to look at whether we can create meaningful opportunities for affordable housing to be constructed in different areas. It does not mean, I repeat, it does not mean that we have to abrogate our zoning codes or get rid of density and height restrictions. Of course not. And nobody would favor an approach like that. So I think we need to focus again on the actual challenge as it exists in the real world, and not a make-believe imaginary version that it may be pleasant to compete against in a political context, but really actually impedes the goal we all share of getting this mess behind us.
I want to switch gears. You're the mayor of New Rochelle, one of the largest cities in the county. Like many mayors and like many local governments, you've had to cut some services or cut back on some of the spending as the money's dried up from Washington or from Albany. Mm-hmm. That's led to grumbling within the city from some quarters. What's your response to that? And isn't that to a certain degree what County Executive Astorino has done on a countywide basis? Well,
look, as a mayor, I've had to face tough choices, as mayors throughout the country have. We know that in a climate of the kind that we're facing, revenues are often stagnant and costs continue to escalate. But I believe we've confronted those challenges in a way that is balanced, not only monetarily, but also balanced in its priorities. New Rochelle today has the leanest municipal workforce in our modern history. We've saved millions of dollars through energy reductions, through refinancing debt, through deferring non-essential programming. And yet we've still managed to carve out investments in our future that will help us to grow our economy, and we've done it in a way that's transparent and inclusive. Just this past year, we had a really active citizens budget panel that outlined a whole series of recommendations that the government is now embracing. I would say, by contrast, the approach that's been taken by the Astorino administration has not been well thought out. There's no real cost-benefit analysis that's being applied, for example, to cuts that are being made in social services. And very often, the kinds of reductions that are being supported are ones that will cost us more in the short term or in the long term. You know, you cut back on eviction prevention, you're going to spend more on homeless shelters. You cut back on home health care assistance, push people into hospitals where health care costs will increase. Cut back on child care assistance, more likely that people will be dependent on welfare. So separate and apart from the human considerations that we might apply to choices of this kind, we've also got to look at it from a business perspective and decide whether we are better or worse off financially. And I'd argue that the choices that have been made have not been intelligent. And I'll add one other thing. It is terrible fiscal practice to borrow tens of millions of dollars to cover the county's operating expenses, which is how the most recent county budget was balanced. That's not a fiscally sustainable approach. And if we are serious about fiscal responsibility, then we need a different approach. And lastly, it's not just about the county's tax bill in isolation, because we know that's only about a sixth of the total. We have to look at the other 5/6 municipalities, school districts, and the county has a natural leadership role to play in structuring a process of shared services that can knock down the overall tax burden. That's something I'd like to pursue with real seriousness if I'm elected, and it's a priority that's been terribly neglected by this administration.
The standard question when there is an elected official seeking another term is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? A lot of people might argue that Westchester County is better off, or at least on the same level than it was 4 years ago? 4 years ago, a lot of economic questions and uncertainty when Mr. Astorino was elected in 2009. Is the county better off now than it was 4 years ago? And if so, why is it time for a change in the county executive's office?
I'll say this. I think everyone has to judge their own circumstances for themselves. But the quality of the county's actions, the quality of the county's policy making, quality of our planning for the future is far worse than it was 4 years ago. A whole raft of county responsibilities are being neglected. And the most important of those, I'd say, is planning for the future of our economy and our environment. There is no coherent strategy to link land use, transportation infrastructure, human capital in a way that will enable us to take advantage of population and economic trends all around the country and capture prosperity for our own residents. And unless we look at that from a regional perspective, unless we have a coherent plan in conjunction with municipalities, with towns and cities, I don't think that Westchester is going to be able to achieve its potential. And to have that aspect of county policymaking completely neglected, as it has been for the last few years, I think puts our future prosperity at risk.
That's a nuanced argument that you just made. Might not, I mean, it'll play out for people who follow politics and Westchester politics with relative closeness. How does that play out? How do you sell that to lesser information voters, voters who don't follow along as closely as you and I do?
Let me say something. I have a lot of respect for voters. And I think most people in this county, most people all around the country, are a lot smarter than some commentators would give them credit for. And we also recognize that it's not just a matter of our present needs. You know, if we've got kids or grandkids, we recognize that the moral test of our own actions and the test of government is whether we're looking ahead and figuring out how their lives can be improved. So I think all voters, all residents, care not just about what we're doing today, but how we are preparing for tomorrow. And if we're not handling both sides of that equation, then those of us in government are not doing our jobs.
Mayor Noam Bramson, the Democratic mayor of New Rochelle and the Democratic nominee for Westchester County Executive. Thanks very much.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.